Hey, Warren on Twitter asked me this question, asking me how things are going with Grocerless Pro. So I'm going to do a real quick update. The short version is it's not going great. I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time, money, and resources on building this thing, and I would do things a lot differently next time. But we're just going to go over the numbers real quick today, and if you guys want to hear more about it or have any other questions, just let me know. So Grocerless Pro is this mobile app, Android and iOS, where you can add items to a pantry list. And then you can request them, and then it creates a little grocery list that you can tap into and check off when you're at the store. Blast of confetti at the end, very fun. And then it has extra features like the ability to scan loyalty cards to share with your housemates. Now, first problem, hard to explain to people how the UX works, and that pans out in user testing. So the problem is that what we did is we picked the flow from these vintage grocery lists. And what's interesting is when I show people the vintage grocery list, they're like, oh, I understand exactly what it is. But if you don't show them, then the app is really confusing. And if you try to explain it to them, it's really confusing. So I'm not a copywriter. I'm not that great at explaining things to people. It's something that I'm actually actively working on. But that's like the biggest problem, I think, with the way the app is architected is it's confusing for people. But when they get it, they get it. So trying to get them over from confusion to getting it is one of the biggest challenges. So now we're going to go over numbers. And these numbers are not great, but I'll show you what's going on. So in the beginning, this is part of a super long beta. It was way too long of a beta. And that one was about maybe 6 months long and probably 25 to 30 people a day. Then we launched it, went up to about 90 to 80 a day from just like people on my Twitter looking at it. And then it went back down to the same numbers from before. So we didn't seem to really gain anybody from the beta, which is not good. So then you can see it kind of starts bumping up here. And what happens is I start posting about it on Twitter again. And there's a very direct correlation to people coming into the funnel, downloading the app from my Twitter. Now, if we go down, what we're going to see here is the engagement time is like very low. This should be much higher. But I should note that the app is kind of designed to allow you to get in and do something really quickly and then quit it. So I don't know if that's triggering as an engaged session or not. That's something I'd want to look into. But it's definitely not nearly as high as I would like it to be. The other thing too is the user retention charts are really low. So you can see that only 4.5% come back the next day, and then it peters down to basically nothing after that. There is one thing I will say though, is that the usage pattern of this app is that you download it, set up your list, and then you might only open it like 3 days later or like 7 days later. And so it's like very short spurts of usage with many days of gap in between for many long months. And so I recently learned that there's a different way to measure user retention, which is not like which day are people showing up on afterwards, but like, are they showing up on or after that day? And so I don't know exactly how Firebase is measuring this. My guess is it's the former, not the latter. But in something like Mixpanel or PostHog, you can get that other chart, and it would be much more useful for apps with my use cadence. And then I think that's it for, just ignore this because this data is not correct. So, but we'll get to money here in a second. So if we go to revenue cap, you can see the MRR is very low. It's about $23 a month in recurring revenue. And the actual revenue is about 140 the last 28 days. You know, it was actually closer to 190 a couple days ago, but I think that's because we had a couple trials that finished up all at the same time. And then they cleared out of the revenue chart here. I don't know why there's such a big difference between these two because I only have recurring purchases. I don't have lifetime purchases. My guess is that what's happening is people are doing the annual trial. Then it expires, they're charged. They realize that they were charged and they go in and turn off renewal, is my guess of what's happening there, which is fair. So I'm considering that churn. But what's interesting is if you click in, then it actually doesn't show up on churn. So I'm not really sure what's going on here in revenue cap, but that's kind of the long story short. Now I want to just talk about this real quick. So The question about what's next. We need family plans. The biggest use pattern seems to be one person in the household is having a hard time keeping up with groceries because they're doing most of the shopping. So they look for an app and then they invite their family. Now, the person who looked for the app, they're the ones who should be able to pay for their entire family. And so right now that's not possible. And I think that that's hurting us actually a lot in the monetization front, and also probably hurting us on growth, because when they install the app, if they could just buy it for everybody, then they would invite all the people that they bought it for, as opposed to being like, yeah, I'm going to try this out and see what I think before inviting people. So that's the first thing. The next one is feature onboarding. I think the app is really confusing to people who have not seen that vintage grocery list. So what I should probably do is just buy one of those and have like in onboarding a video of me being like, hey, look at this cool thing I saw. I made this other thing. It's this app that you have in your hands right now. And if you pay me money, you can invite your whole family to it and you can collaborate and use it. And it's got your recurring items and it's awesome. So I should probably do that. The other thing is we should show paywall nags more. So right now we only show paywall after onboarding, and we never show it again unless you actually run out of the free tier. We could show those much more proactively, because I've heard that the first 7 days is when like 80% of people on a mobile app typically convert. And I think it's even tighter than that. I think it's like the first 3 days. So getting those paywall nags up early should help with monetization. And then the other thing I want to say is that lists are extremely deceiving in that they're simple, but everyone uses them differently. It's like basically a meme that new programmers build themselves like a list app. But a colleague said something interesting to me, which is that the reason why so many people build these list apps is because everyone uses lists so much differently that there's essentially no list apps out there that work perfectly for any one person. So once you can actually build your own list app, then you're like, great, I can have the list app that I always wanted, which is what I did. But then having that be useful for other people is actually much more difficult from a product stance than I ever imagined. And then again, we need to make the floor much more clear to members. Oh, I squandered the 7-day App Store boost. So what I did was my beta test was basically trying to figure out what features people wanted. What I should have done instead is try to figure out how to make the app more engaging, how to make the app more sticky, how to make sure people were returning and finding success, as opposed to asking them what features they wanted. Because then when I launched it on the App Store, Apple gives you a 7-day boost. And so if it were stickier when it had gone to the App Store with that boost, and then if I had run ads on it, and if I had asked people to search for like our top keywords and scroll down and download the app to pull it out of the search results, if I had done all those things, it could have reached the activation energy to actually turn into a viable business. But none of those things happened. And that's like one of my biggest takeaways from this project. The other thing too is the UX is a little weird. And if I were to do another pass on the project, I think it would be actually much better. And so then the question is, do I invest in Grocery List Pro to try to change the flow into basically a different list app? Or do I take the L, which is not the loss, but take the learnings, and take them to another app and then relaunch, get that 7-day boost, run the ads and see what happens. So just some ideas, and that's kind of an update on what I got going on there. So thank you very much.